Guys, Mac Jones, if you haven't had your trade deadline, are you sending a late 23 first for Mac Jones?
No.
Yeah, man, that's a tough one for me because I actually think Mac Jones is better than we give him credit for, but it is fair to say no matter how good he is, what is his fantasy ceiling? That's always been this question. So it'd have to be a very specific roster where I'm already like kind of up to the gills in terms of like how many receivers I need and do I have some extra capital? Do I need a QB3? I would consider it, but I wouldn't just be, okay, I need to go get Mac Jones. I'll send a late first everywhere. No.
Yeah, so we talk about this a lot, but dude, that just feels like a waste of that asset. I'd rather use that asset with something else and go get a quarterback that matters. Just in case anyone put in our comments, please don't comp Mac Jones to Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins has been a QB1 most of his career, even if it is a low QB1. And no, I don't think that's Mac Jones' upside. I think Mac Jones' upside's 15, 16.
Mac Jones actually is better than what you probably give him credit for. Those same numbers I was talking about for Zach Wilson. He's 16th. He's very similar. I'm not saying he's Kirk Cousins, but the difference between him and Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins has found himself in situations where he's been able to be what he is.
I mean, I would argue that Kirk Cousins has made those situations for himself. I don't think Mac Jones is good enough to elevate himself to that. I think
the numbers say differently, though.
In fairness, Mac Jones, his best receiver since he's been in the league has been
Nelson Aguilar.
It's probably Jacoby Myers.
Jacoby Myers. Yeah, and Jacoby Myers, I like Jacoby Myers, but he shouldn't be your wide receiver one on an offense.
I think Mac Jones is good. If you told me you gave him Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, and Devontae Adams, he's Derek Carr. He's probably better. Honestly, like his numbers, if you isolate that stuff, he's pretty good. He can be a distributor. He is not a elevator. He is a guy that can give you whatever the efficiency of the offense is, which is, I think Derek Carr is a decent benchmark for Mac Jones. The good and the bad. And that's not great. If you told me the dynasty path for Derek Carr, you wouldn't have loved that. Derek Carr's never been a guy where you're like, oh, I can sell him for 2 firsts. Like that's probably what Mac Jones is.
I don't think you could have ever really sold Derek Carr for 1 first.
At times, but that's it. Yes.
I mean, that's going to have to be specific weeks when he had 2 weeks in a row where he scored 25 points and somebody was like, this is it. He's finally turning the corner. Like he's taking that next step into being like, not just a guy, but being the guy, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I shouldn't judge Mac Jones on the fact that he's only had Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne, Devontae Parker. Like his wide receiver core is pretty trash, excluding Jacoby. But I still don't think, based off what I've seen, I don't think he's special in any way.
Who do you think we're going to like more here once he gets his legs under him a bit more? Pickett or Mac Jones?
Mac Jones. Far better than Kenny Pickett.
I'm going with Pickett.
Not even close.
See, this is where me and Scott differ. I like upside, right? When I look at Mac Jones, all I see is like, if you squint hard enough, like Scott said, he could be Derek Carr. I look at Kenny Pickett and I'm like, yeah, this dude could be top 8 if everything goes right. Now, is everything going to go right with him? Pretty low chance of that. You know what I mean? Like the dude had, I think coming in the night, something like 2 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. But as much as I want to just pawn off those interceptions to not being his fault, just the upside there for me would make me go with Pickett.
I will acknowledge that Kenny Pickett, his 20% or better range of outcomes is higher than Mac Jones. But if I had to bet on the guy that just sucks, it's Kenny Pickett. The guy that can get a second contract and probably be a game manager. I mean, can Mac Jones be a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo? Easily. Kenny Pickett, it could be another. Kenny Pickett's going down the road of another Sam Darnold.
Oh, gross.
But there's also a period where like Sam Darnold's peak for fantasy is better than what, Jimmy Garoppolo's really ever given you in a period of time. So it's really, what do you want? If you want to bet on, Kenny Pickett could be a 400-yard rusher in the NFL, right? Mac Jones is lucky to hit 200 yards. But which one do you want to bet on being a quarterback in the next 3 years?
Right.
It's not Pickett for me.
No, and this is where me and Scott differs. I'll take shots on this guy, and then that's why I'll have some teams that I go, oh, well, they're 2-14 because I took shots on too many of those guys on one roster. Like I probably should have some safe bets, and instead of just going all upside guys.
Moving over to Trey Lance. Let's talk about his value. Hopefully you don't have a trade deadline and you could send this. Would you give up a mid-23 first for Trey Lance?
Easy. Now I would, yes.
Banking on the upside. There's Scott. Look at Scott looking at the upside.
Well, no. I'll justify it by saying this. When Trey Lance got hurt, we talked about Trey Lance's injury, and we were, let's get out for a first. But that was the first couple weeks of the season. We've had 10 weeks go by.
Right.
We've seen one of the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks in this rookie class go down with a torn ACL. Guaranteed, Hendon Hooker will not go in the top 60 picks, right? And now you're praying for a guy like Anthony Richardson to declare so he can go in the second round and be a first-round quarterback in Dynasty. And I'm looking at Trey Lance going like we're doing a mock startup at Destination Devy, and the Trey Lance is going in the second round. Because you get to QB 12 or 13, you go, who the hell else am I going to take?
Okay, you don't want to take Russ Wilson or Aaron Rodgers.
No, everyone else just drops off. Matt Stafford, Russ Wilson. I mean, it's just a drop-off. And so unless you want to take Kirk Cousins as like the next quarterback off the board or Kenny Pickett, then it's like by default, Trey Lance is QB 12 or QB 13 before the rookies slot in. So I think if you get him for a mid-first, I would rather take Trey Lance for a 107 than I would draft CJ Stroud or Bryce Young at the 102.
So what would you rather have in one QB? Would you rather have Trey Lance or an early 23 seconds and a 24 second?
Trey Lance.
Yeah, I think he's the perfect guy you buy low in a 1 QB, and you're like, if he's just terrible and fades out of the league, then I'll just take another shot next year. Like I think he's the perfect buy low in a 1 QB.
You wouldn't want to bank on him being your QB2 next year, right? So if he's your QB3, you're okay with that. Talk to me about where Trey Lance would fit in roster construction wise in a superflex.
Well, okay, so what team do you have? You should know by now if you think your team's going to be contending next year. If I'm not really expecting my team to contend, or I think it's marginal, I can live with him as my QB too, because I don't want to just plow assets into that position. I'd rather take that chance and be like, all right, well, maybe Trey Lance can actually turn into the high-end QB1 that we thought he could be. And I'm just going to take the shot on this team as opposed to trading for another quarterback or trading him and more assets for a different quarterback. Maybe it's because I got burned by trading Jalen Hurts in too many leagues last year and then buying back. I don't want to go through that again. I don't want to go, I should have, if I would have just held on to Jalen Hurts and that late first instead of trading for Lamar Jackson, like where would my roster be as opposed to right now?
I think the one thing you have with Lance that you don't have with some other guys that are below him, and the reason why he goes so high in startups and why his value is probably going to continue to go up and why I'd pay the mid first. He is the one guy in that range where if some things break right for him, you could see the community after, let's say he's healthy, he's their starter, he starts off okay the first couple games next year. You could easily, he's now in the mix of an asset you could go and get Trevor Lawrence with. You could go get Justin Fields with. You're never doing that. I don't care if you take Kirk Cousins QB 15 and he goes out and is the QB 1 through 4 weeks, he's still not moving the needle going to get T-Law or going to pivot up. So I think Lance is the wild card where it's like, man, I can see a story where the community buys back in. And so he's the perfect guy to say, okay, all I need is X, Y, and Z to happen. And now he's 75% of my ability to go get another quarterback, but he's not a zero in the trade, like Shane was saying. If Shane likes Trey Lance, like you might be able to come to him and say, Shane, what do I need to add to Trey Lance to get Dak Prescott? And it's like, oh, maybe, you know what? I can at least find a deal to do that. Whereas some of these other guys, you can't. So I think that's where he is a little bit of a wild card still. You just haven't seen anything from him. And he's going to be going into year 3 with literally no experience. And you almost wonder, are the 49ers ready to deploy a Trey Lance offense? Like you can't afford to wait another year for them to figure out how to use him. And then it's like, now what? You know, there is some risk.
There's a ton of risk. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo wins the Super Bowl and Jimmy says, all right, I want to come back. And, San Francisco says, all right, well, he won the Super Bowl. We see you, Trey. We're going to trade you to the Jets. And then him and Zach Wilson are fighting it out. And I mean, Zach Wilson's pretty petty. He might just shank him in the shower.
I mean, if Jimmy wins the Super Bowl, first of all, they can't franchise tag him anymore.
No,
so Jimmy wins the Super Bowl. Guess where he's going? Somewhere.
What do you mean they won't be able to afford him? There's no such thing as you can't afford. You can afford the players you want to afford. The players that you don't want are the ones you go, yeah, we got to cut them because we're the cap space.
If he wins the Super Bowl, he's getting Rodgers money.
Yeah.
Which is insane, but I mean, the reports are
the
Jalen
Commanders
Hurts
will give him a bag.
Reports are Jalen Hurts is getting close to the $50 million a year, and it's like if he's gonna get that after this sample size, but Jimmy G wins a Super Bowl, like
I mean, but one's an MVP and the other's just a dude that.
I mean, Derek Carr just got $40 million a year. Shane, you're telling me Jimmy G couldn't go to the Niners and say, "Listen, Derek Carr, me." I mean,
NFL teams make really poor decisions when it comes to quarterbacks.
It probably is the Commanders, honestly.
Yeah, the Commanders
would be the team that would chase Jimmy G, or the Jets. I could see Jimmy G going to the Jets.
Well, hopefully they don't build him a statue. Sorry.